This is a pretty good Ted Cruz interview. He was on Fox and Friends this morning, and they discuss a variety of topics from healthcare to the special elections to how it was like having Alan Dershowitz as college professor and them debating after class. So anyways, here's the video. I hope you enjoy it.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz joins us right now. It's always great to see you. 27 minutes before the top of the hour. And Senator, I'd like to pick up where you just left off on this Georgia 6 special election. What do you think's at stake? Because you're such a you always read trends in the media, where we're heading, where we're not. What do you read from this? What do you expect will happen?
Well, it's certainly an important race. We've seen Democrats and liberals all across the country pouring tens of millions of dollars into the race. What they hope to get is a victory against President Trump. They're using this as a proxy to try to attack the president, try to attack the new administration and the Republican majorities in both houses. And a special election is always unpredictable. It's hard to know exactly what's going to happen, but it's going to be a turnout game. And so I would certainly say to voters in Georgia, if you are in the district, please come out and vote for Karen Handel. It matters to show up. And right now, the left, they're agitated, they're furious, they're angry, and so they're motivated to show up, and it's just a question of whether Republicans and conservatives will show up in the special election.
Well, Senator, I've heard Democrats say on television that it is the most important election in the history of the world, unless Mr. Ossoff loses, and then not so much. They're saying it's the Scott Brown election for them.
Well, you know, they said that as well in Kansas 4, Mike Pompeo's seat, and Republicans won that. They said that in the Montana seat, Republicans won that. Look, eventually Democrats may win one of these. I mean, elections, particularly special elections, are unpredictable, but it is important to show up and turn out. They're trying to use this as a dagger to stop the conservative agenda, to stop Obamacare repeal, to stop tax reform, to stop the reasons why the American people gave us a Republican president and Republican majorities in both houses. And so if you care about that agenda, if you care about strong conservatives on the Supreme Court, it matters to win these elections.
I know that meant a lot to you. He did appoint the Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. You had a contentious relationship with President Trump when you guys were running against each other, but he did appoint Neil Gorsuch. He wants the tax cuts, energy independence, Obamacare repeal and replace. These are things that you were on board with as well. Are you happy with his agenda so far, thus far, now that he's 151 days in?
I think on policy and substance, the new president and the new administration have done very well. I think if you look at the cabinet that's been appointed, this is probably the most conservative cabinet we've seen in decades. If you look at the executive actions, they've been quite strong, whether freezing the hiring of new civilian non-military employees, whether putting in place a moratorium on regulations, whether stopping taxpayer funding for overseas abortion, or whether pulling out of the disastrous job-killing Paris Climate Agreement. All of those were strong decisions with a mandate from the people. And the single biggest and most important thing the president has done is appointing Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. And the best thing Senate Republicans have done is confirming Justice Gorsuch.
You know, over the weekend, I was struck by a New York Times columnist who's a conservative, but he's such a Trump critic, you wonder sometimes if he actually is. David Brooks says the more you look at it, there's nothing there in terms of collusion with Russia. And this is looking like we're getting way off track here. You have a great legal mind, Senator. Where is this thing heading, especially with Robert Mueller, who was endorsed by both sides, hiring the type of team he's put together?
Listen, this is all a political circus at this point. Democrats and sadly much of the liberal media are using this as an excuse just to attack the president. They want this president to fail. They want the administration to fail. And I think that's really unfortunate. You know, I got to tell you, there's an amazing divide. When you're in Washington, D.C., the only question any reporter ever wants to ask you about is about Russia, is about impeachment, is about attacking the president. When I go home to Texas, I travel the state. I answer questions from people across the state. Nobody asks about that. They ask about Obamacare. Are you going to repeal this disastrous law so my premiums go down so I can afford health care? They ask about tax reform. I'd like taxes to be simpler. Ideally, what I'd like to see is a simple flat tax, and we abolish the IRS. People outside of Washington are interested in real policies that are going to produce jobs, raise wages. They're not interested in the nonsense, in the attack game and the personal destruction that consumes Washington.
So, Senator, are y'all going to work through the recess to work on health care, to work on the tax reform?
You know, I certainly hope so. In my view, there are 4 big priorities for 2017. Repealing Obamacare, fundamental tax reform, major reg reform, and the Supreme Court. And when it comes to repealing Obamacare, I can tell you I am working day and night, every waking moment, trying to bring Republicans together to focus, number 1, on delivering on our promise.
Right.
To repeal this disastrous law, but number 2, critically, the most important issue, we've got to lower premiums. The biggest reason people are unhappy with Obamacare, their premiums have skyrocketed. Average family's premiums have risen over $5,000 a year.
Plan, Senator,
we got to fix that.
Is the plan that you hear that's coming out of the gang that's put together, this plan that you're eventually going to vote for, does it lower premiums? Does it do a better job than what came from the House? Because so far we see, according to the Wall Street Journal, all direction is vote before July 4th. What do you know?
Well, we're not there yet in terms of agreement. In the Senate, we've got a really narrow majority, 52 Republicans. We've got to get at least 50 on the same page. We're not there yet. You know, the working group started with a small group of 6 senators that Lamar Alexander and I brought together and have been talking about this for many months, working to get to common ground. We're not there yet. The current draft doesn't do nearly enough to lower premiums. But I think if we focus on lowering premiums, we can bring together conservatives, we can bring together moderates, we can unify Republicans and actually fulfill the mandate the American people sent us here to do.
Yeah. Senator, let's talk a little bit about the hearing on campus assault on free speech. Tell us more about that.
Well, today, 10 a.m., the Senate Judiciary Committee, we're going to be conducting a hearing on the assault on free speech on university campuses. And if you look at what's happening on universities, it's heartbreaking.
It's terrible.
They have become these so-called protected safe spaces where anything that challenges the left-wing orthodoxy is silenced, is muzzled, is shouted down. You know, to hear college students at wonderful colleges and universities yelling epithets at police officers, yelling curses at police officers, it's heartbreaking. And universities should be a place where you go to get your ideas challenged, where you go to discover hard, difficult ideas and to discover what you believe. Sure. The whole point of a university, you know, when I was in college, I took classes from Marxists, and I was glad that I did. You want to understand the ideas on the other side, the ideas that are wrong, and yet today's leftist college administrators and faculties, they're so afraid of being challenged. They can't defend their ideas that they just want to muzzle students. It's wrong, sure. and it's inconsistent with the role of a university, which is to train young minds.
Senator, I'll tell you, it's really affected when people go look for a college now.
Yes.
Are they going to be able to speak their mind? Are they going to be safe spaces in times of turmoil?
Yeah.
Can they speak something differently than their professor? We just had Alan Dershowitz on. He loves you, but you couldn't be more different politically. You were not, I imagine you were not suppressed on college campus.
Well, that's exactly right. And actually, Alan Dershowitz is a great example. He was a wonderful teacher. Alan is a liberal. But he's an honest liberal. He believes what he believes. And when I was a student, he and I became good friends, mostly because in criminal law class, he'd get up there and he'd lay out his criticisms of Justice Scalia or Justice Thomas or Justice Rehnquist. And it would provoke me to say, now, hold on a second, Professor. And we'd go back and forth. And a lot of times afterwards, we'd go back to his office and continue the discussion for half hour, an hour. And he became a really good friend precisely because he engaged and taught me as a student, challenged my ideas. I tried to challenge his. He was in a much stronger position than I was, but it was a wonderful learning experience. That's what college should be all about. And when you put students in this protected environment, when you nurture them and just protect them from anything that challenges them, you know, that's a sign of weakness. If your ideas are so fragile that if anyone disagrees with them, you'll crumple in a ball, well, maybe you ought to reconsider your ideas. Maybe you haven't thought through them very carefully. Mm-hmm. The whole point of university is to encounter different ideas and also to learn to understand those who disagree with you. They're not necessarily evil or stupid. So much of political discourse is nasty and personal and vicious. You know, when I was in college, I was the chairman of the Conservative Party. One of my very good friends was the leader of the Liberal Party in the debating club. And we would go and have vigorous debates, vigorous arguments. And I'd call him a communist. He'd call me a fascist. We'd go out and get a beer. I mean, don't take yourself so darn seriously. Have fun and learn. That's what college should be.
That would be a good slogan for Coors Light. It brings the fascists, the socialists, the communists.
Tomorrow's question of the day: if a fascist goes out for a beer with a socialist, who pays? Fantastic. We'll see if that goes over.
And I think your professor said you were the brightest student he ever taught.
Right.
Well, he's very
Congratulations on that. All right. Thank you so much for being with us. Good.